Hello from Mindset Daily, wishing you a day full of health, peace, and happiness. Thank you for watching the Mindset Daily channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe to support us. Thank you so much.
Have you ever wondered why your most powerful moments often happen in silence? What if solitude isn't a sign of weakness, but preparation for something greater? And what if God's greatest work in you happens when no one else is watching? People often misunderstand what it means to be alone. They equate solitude with suffering, as if silence means something is wrong. Society teaches us to measure our value by how many people stand beside us. If no one is there, they assume we must be broken or lost. But that couldn't be further from the truth. Some of the most transformative seasons in your life will be the ones where you walk alone. Not because you've failed, not because you've been forgotten, but because God is setting you apart. He's pulling you away from distractions, not to punish you, but to prepare you. He's isolating you so that he can do something deeper, something greater, something sacred within you. To move you toward what lies ahead, he often has to strip away what surrounds you now. It may feel uncomfortable. It may feel lonely, but it's not a curse. It's a divine process. You see, the world celebrates noise. It glorifies popularity. We're taught that success is measured by attention, applause, and the number of followers we gain. But heaven doesn't measure value that way. In fact, some of your greatest breakthroughs will happen when no one is clapping. They'll happen when your name is unknown to the world, but intimately known by God. Think about it. Before Jesus stepped into his calling, he went into the wilderness alone. Before David wore a crown, he was faithfully tending sheep in the fields, completely unseen and alone. Before Joseph ruled in Egypt, he sat in a prison cell, hidden away, alone. And yet, in those silent, forgotten places, something powerful was unfolding. Their character was being shaped. Their strength was being tested. Their faith was being forged. And their identity? It wasn't crafted by the approval of others. It was refined in the quiet. We often pray for the spotlight, longing to be seen, heard, celebrated. But sometimes God answers by saying, no, not yet. Let me hide you for a while. Because it's in the hiding place where he teaches you to recognize his voice. It's where the noise of opinions fades away, where the weight of performance is lifted, and the illusion that you need others to feel whole begins to disappear. In solitude, God doesn't come to break you down. He comes to build you up. He draws you away, not to isolate you, but to elevate you, to show you that your foundation doesn't rest on popularity, but on purpose. And in those quiet moments when you feel alone, you're not truly alone. God is there. He meets you in the silence, walks beside you when no one else does, and speaks to you when the world goes quiet. And once you begin to recognize his voice in those moments, something shifts. You begin to realize that there is nothing more powerful than knowing who you are when no one else is around to tell you. You stop craving applause. You stop chasing after validation. You no longer seek out shallow connections just to ease the ache of loneliness, because now you're anchored to the one who created you. You're rooted in something real, something eternal. There's a reason seeds are buried in darkness before they ever bloom into light. Before anything beautiful grows upward, it must first grow downward. It has to take root in the unseen. It has to be grounded in strength before it can bear fruit. Because if a seed rises too soon, before it's stable, it withers. If it's exposed before it's fully rooted, it collapses. And many of us, without realizing it, are asking God for the fruit before we've allowed him to take us through the season of rooting. We're eager for the platform, but haven't embraced the process. We want visibility, but haven't built the foundation. But God, in his mercy, won't promote us before we're ready. He loves us too much to watch us fall under the weight of unprepared blessing. So don't rush your season of solitude. Don't look down on the days when it's just you and your thoughts, your doubts, your prayers, and your faith. That's where transformation takes place. That's where your strength is forged. That's where you begin to grow into the person who's strong enough to carry what God is preparing to place in your hands. It's in those quiet places that healing begins. And you don't need a stadium full of people cheering for you to feel worthy. Sometimes, all it takes is one whisper from heaven saying, I'm with you. Because when God is with you, Who left doesn't matter. Who walked away no longer defines your worth. Whose hands let go doesn't change who holds your future. He's not raising you up in public for attention. He's building you in private with purpose. He's setting you apart. Not because you're forgotten, not because you're unworthy, but because you are chosen. And if you remain faithful in the quiet places, in the stillness, in the obscurity, in the moments no one sees, you'll emerge stronger. You'll walk out wiser. You'll be ready. Because some of your most sacred victories will happen when no one is watching. Solitude is not your prison. It's your preparation. You know, there's something undeniably powerful that happens when the noise finally fades. When the phone calls stop. When the buzzing notifications go silent. When the people you once leaned on begin to slowly disappear into the background. At first, it feels like loss. It feels like being abandoned. Like you're standing in a room full of silence with nothing but your own thoughts for company. And sometimes, your own voice can be the loudest, most unsettling sound of all. But here's the thing. That trembling, quiet voice inside you, the one you've spent years trying to drown out, that voice is the one you've needed to hear all along. Maybe, just maybe, this season of isolation isn't really about who walked away. Maybe it's about who you're finally becoming. Because when the world gets quiet, when distractions fall away, when performance is no longer required, that's when the most important conversations begin. Not with others, but with yourself. For far too long, we've allowed other people to narrate our stories. We've shaped our lives around what was expected, not what was authentic. We've marched to someone else's rhythm, lived in costumes stitched together with opinions that never really fit. We've spoken in voices that weren't our own and pursued dreams that never came from our hearts in the first place. But solitude has a way of stripping all that away. When you're truly alone, without performance, without an audience, you begin to hear the difference between the version of you shaped by the world and the version shaped by God. That voice inside you, it's not weak. It's just been buried beneath years of disappointment, doubt, and distraction. But in the stillness, it starts to come alive again. And then something incredible begins to happen. You realize your voice was never lost. It was just crowded out, silenced by the pressure to be accepted, covered by the noise of public opinion, muted by the fear of not measuring up. But now that the world is quiet, what do you hear? Not fear, not shame. You hear truth. You hear clarity. You hear conviction. You hear calling. That voice, that's your voice. And this, right now, is the season where God gently teaches you to stop outsourcing your value, to stop begging for validation, to stop hoping someone else will give you permission to be who you already are. He's drawing you back to the place where your own soul becomes your sanctuary, where your voice holds more weight than their applause. And once you start speaking from that place, not to impress others, but to remind yourself of who you are, that's when healing begins. That's when real change begins. That's when true power starts to take root. You gotta begin speaking to yourself like someone with purpose, like someone who's going somewhere. Start declaring life over yourself with boldness, with faith, and with grace. It's time to stop repeating what others have said about you. Stop echoing their doubts. Stop carrying their criticism like it was truth. Ask yourself this: what has God said about me? What have I heard in the quiet moments when no one else was around? That's the voice you follow. Because let me tell you, no one can affirm you like the Holy Spirit can. No one can confirm you like heaven can. When that divine voice begins to rise from within you, something starts to shift. You walk with a new sense of purpose. Your steps feel grounded. You begin to make decisions not from pressure or fear, but from peace. You no longer react to every temptation or invitation. You begin to say no to what once pulled you off course, and yes to the calling that once felt too big, too overwhelming. Not because someone told you to, but because you heard it within your own soul. You believed it. You received it. And when that voice becomes your guide, you stop trying to squeeze into rooms that were never designed for your growth. You stop shrinking yourself to make others feel more comfortable. You no longer allow insecurity to wear your name like a label. Because now, your voice reminds you of who you are and what you carry. It speaks truth when the world goes quiet. It whispers, even if no one claps, you're still chosen. Even if no one stays, you're still worthy. Even if doors close in your face, God still opens the ones meant for you. Your voice reminds you that you're not falling apart. You're being formed. There's clarity in solitude, strength in stillness, revelation in the silence. So don't waste it. Don't rush through it. Don't drown it out with distractions just to avoid the sound of your own soul. Because this is where confidence takes root. This is where courage is born. Not in noise, but in stillness. This is where your future begins. In a moment, you start listening to the voice that's always known the way. It was never lost. You just had to get quiet enough to finally hear it. And that voice, that's your breakthrough. When everything around you fades, when the world falls silent and you're left alone with your thoughts, that's when something remarkable begins. You begin to truly hear yourself. Not the self the world has molded or manipulated, but the self that was created in purpose and love. For so long, you've been trained to tune in to everyone else, to seek approval, to conform, to fit neatly into expectations that were never designed with your soul in mind. But in the quiet, something deeper begins to rise. You start to recognize that the voice you've been listening to for years, the one that made you question your worth, your path, your potential, wasn't yours at all. It was the voice of the world, of pressure, of comparison, and the voice you've been ignoring, the one buried beneath the layers of opinions, judgment, and performance. That voice, that's your real one. And this moment is not just about speaking, it's about listening. Because we've spent so much of our lives trying to meet the expectations of others, trying to earn approval, trying to prove ourselves in a world that never seems satisfied, always raising the bar. But now, in this silence, you're being invited to something better, something truer. But when you're finally left alone with yourself, no noise, no audience, no expectations, you stop hearing the demands of the outside world. And for the first time, you start to tune into something far more significant. The voice within. The voice that doesn't echo the world's expectations, but instead reminds you of who you truly are, not who others say you should be. It's the voice that carries God's truth about you, the one that has always known your worth, even when the world tried to bury it beneath lies, limitations, and fear. And in those sacred moments of solitude, you discover something remarkable. Your voice isn't weak. It's not small. It's not irrelevant. It's actually the most powerful voice you'll ever hear, because it's the only one that's been with you through it all. That voice will lead you toward your purpose, even when you're unsure, even when you can't see the full path ahead. That voice knows your potential, knows it deeply, because it was planted there by design. It will call you out of your darkest seasons and gently guide you back into the light. And when you start to truly listen, not just hear, but listen, you'll begin to notice something changing. You'll hear clarity where there was once confusion. You'll hear strength rising where weakness tried to live. You'll hear truth pushing back against the noise. In a world filled with constant motion and endless noise, it's easy to forget the power of a quiet moment. But here's what we often miss. God speaks loudest in silence. In the stillness, when we stop striving and start surrendering, His whispers become undeniable. That's when we become most open to His direction. And in that quiet space, something sacred is revealed. You realize that the voice you've been searching for all this time wasn't out there. It's been inside you all along. That inner voice, aligned with God's voice, is the one guiding you toward your true path. It's the one you've avoided because you were too busy pleasing others, too afraid of rejection, too distracted by fear. But when you finally pause, when you quiet the noise and give yourself permission to listen, you discover a truth that changes everything. No one knows you better than you, and no one can speak to your destiny like the one who created you. So let me ask you, what have you been saying to yourself? What have you believed for far too long? Has your internal dialogue been shaped by fear, by criticism, by the expectations of others? Because here's the truth. Many of us have been living by someone else's script. We've let others define who we are, what we can do, and what we're worthy of. But the moment you start listening to your own voice, your voice in alignment with truth, you begin to reclaim your story. You begin to take the pen back from the crowd. You begin to write a new narrative. You begin to break free from the lies that held you captive for far too long. And this is where the real transformation begins. When you finally start listening to your own voice, something shifts deep within. You begin to speak with confidence. Not the kind that needs applause or recognition, but the quiet, unwavering authority that comes from knowing who you are. You stop seeking approval from others because you already carry the certainty that you've been approved by the one who created you. You no longer crave validation from the crowd. Why? Because you've already been validated by the only voice that truly matters. And with that foundation, you begin to speak life over your own circumstances. You speak hope where there was once despair. You speak truth where lies once echoed. You speak courage right into the heart of your fears. And when you start speaking from that place, when your words align with your worth, you stop waiting for permission. You stop waiting for someone else to hand you the microphone. You reach for it. You hold it. You become the voice that leads your life. It's a powerful realization when you finally understand that the voice you've spent so long avoiding is actually the one that holds the key to your destiny. Not someone else's opinion, not someone else's approval, but your own voice, rooted in truth, aligned with purpose. That voice, that's the voice of your true self. The one the world tried to quiet, distort, or ignore. The one that's been whispering beneath the noise all along. While the world was shouting at you to become someone else, your true voice was quietly waiting, ready to guide you back home. And now you have a choice. You can choose to keep listening to everything the world wants you to be. Or you can choose to listen to the voice that aligns with what God already knows about you. You can choose to honor the calling that's been placed on your life. You can walk in truth, your truth. You can decide, here and now, to be loyal to who you were always meant to be. So don't be afraid of the silence. Don't fear the moments when it's just you and your thoughts. Lean into them, because in those still moments, when the world fades and the noise quiets, you are closer to your truth than ever before. Your voice is not weak. It is not small. It is not insignificant. In fact, it is the most powerful force in your life, because it's the very voice that will lead you into your purpose. It will guide your decisions, define your direction, and declare your worth. And when you begin to speak from that place, from a place of clarity, conviction, and alignment, there is nothing and no one that can stand in your way. In the quiet, you begin to uncover something extraordinary, the true power of your own voice. And that, my friend, is a voice that can shift everything. Because one of the most life-changing truths you will ever come to understand is this. People can admire you, they can cheer you on, they can even love you, but only God can complete you. It sounds simple, almost too simple, but when you truly grasp it, not just with your mind, but with your heart, it changes everything. For far too long, we've been conditioned to believe that our worth is measured by our relationships, by the way others perceive us, by the titles we hold, the success we achieve, or the image we project. But the truth? None of those things can fill the deepest spaces within us. Not really. Not unless we first acknowledge that it is God, and God alone, who makes us whole. Because here's what happens. When you place your sense of fulfillment in the hands of people, when your identity is wrapped up in how others validate you, you're setting yourself up for inevitable disappointment. People are human. They change. They leave. They fail to see your value. And if your self-worth rises and falls with their opinions, you'll forever be stuck chasing approval you were never meant to depend on. But here's the turning point. When your identity is rooted in God, when your worth is anchored in His love, then no matter what others say or do, no matter who leaves or misunderstands you, you remain unshaken. You stand firm because you know who you are. Now don't get me wrong. Relationships matter. We are wired for connection. We're created for community, for love, for meaningful bonds with others. But before you can give yourself fully to anyone else, you must first surrender yourself fully to God. You have to let Him fill the parts of your heart that no one else can even reach. Because only He knows the real you, the full you. Only He knows your deepest desires, your silent fears, your divine calling. He sees every part of you, what you show and what you hide. And when you let Him do what only He can, when you allow Him to complete you, you don't show up desperate for validation. You show up whole. You move from a place of fullness, not lack. You become a vessel of love, not one who begs to be filled, but one who freely overflows. There is something deeply powerful and peaceful about that. When you no longer need someone else to define your value. When you no longer rely on a relationship, a job, a status, or applause to complete you, you begin to experience a kind of freedom the world can't offer. And that's when you finally realize you don't need someone else to complete you. You were already made whole by the one who knew you before you even knew yourself. So many people live with a quiet, constant fear, the fear of being alone, of never finding the right person to walk through life with. That fear can linger in the background, shaping our decisions and fueling our anxiety. But something shifts when you're truly connected to God. You begin to realize that you're never actually alone. His presence isn't seasonal. His love isn't conditional. He's with you always. And most beautiful part, his love isn't based on how well you perform, what you achieve, or how you look on the outside. It isn't earned. It's given. Freely, fully, unconditionally. And when you finally allow that kind of love to settle into your heart, to fill the spaces no one else could ever reach, something incredible begins to unfold. You stop chasing love like it's something to be earned. You stop searching for it in all the wrong places, hoping that someone else will complete what only God can fulfill. You stop trying to build your worth around romantic attention or social approval. Instead, you become secure, rooted in who you are. Not because someone told you you're enough, but because God already declared it. You no longer settle for less than what your soul truly deserves. You stop bending yourself to fit the expectations of people who never took the time to understand you. And slowly but surely, you begin to attract the right people. The ones who don't try to change you, control you, or fix you, but who see you, truly see you, not for who they want you to be, but for who you already are. Because when God completes you, something powerful happens. You stop striving. You no longer feel the need to constantly prove yourself. You don't waste energy trying to keep up with the ever-changing standards of the world. You walk in a different kind of confidence. The kind that comes from knowing you are already fully loved, fully accepted, and perfectly designed for the purpose you were created to fulfill. That's the unmatched beauty of God's love. It doesn't just fill the cracks. It restores what was broken. It heals what was hidden. It rewrites the lies you once believed and replaces them with truth. It makes you whole from the inside out. And when you're whole, you stop waiting for someone else to give you permission to live fully. But understand this, the enemy wants the opposite. He wants to trap you in a cycle of chasing approval. He wants you to believe your worth is something you earn through performance, perfection, and people-pleasing. He wants you exhausted, doubting yourself, constantly striving for love that always seems just out of reach. But God's truth, it's radically different. He loves you as you are, flaws and all, in this very moment. He's not asking you to prove yourself. He already chose you. You are enough. Not because of what you've done, but because of who made you. So stop chasing people who make you feel like you're not enough. Stop waiting for someone else to validate your worth. Because the right person, the one meant for you, will never be your worth. They will reflect it. They will recognize what's already there, what God placed in you long before the world tried to tell you otherwise. When you are made whole in Him, you stop chasing validation from the wrong places. You're no longer driven by the need to prove your worth to others. Instead, you begin to walk with quiet confidence, refusing to settle for anything less than what God has intended for you. Because when God completes you, it's not just to make you feel full, it's so that His love can overflow from your life into the lives of those around you. You become a living vessel of encouragement, a beacon of calm, and a source of genuine joy for the people in your world. That constant fear, wondering if you're good enough, questioning whether you truly matter, starts to fade. Why? Because your identity becomes anchored in Christ. You are deeply loved. You are intentionally chosen. And most importantly, you are enough. Can you imagine the freedom of knowing you don't need anyone else to make you feel whole? When you truly grasp that truth, the pressure of needing someone else to complete you begins to dissolve. And in that newfound completeness, you discover something profound, a steady sense of peace, joy, and meaning. These aren't just passing feelings. They're rooted in something no relationship, no career, and no achievement can ever take away. One of the most freeing realizations you can have is this: your happiness doesn't need to depend on someone else's presence. Isn't that a powerful thought? Far too many people spend their lives believing they need another person to feel fulfilled, to feel alive, valued, or happy. But the truth is, no one else can give you the kind of deep, lasting happiness that springs from within. That's why learning to be genuinely content on your own is one of the most empowering gifts you can offer yourself. Depending on others for your happiness is a fragile way to live. It places your peace in the hands of people who, like all of us, are imperfect and ever-changing. People can be unpredictable. Circumstances shift. And sometimes, those you thought would stand by you forever walk away. If your sense of joy is tethered to the ever-changing emotions or actions of others, you'll constantly feel unsettled. But when your happiness is rooted in your own identity, your faith, and your personal walk with God, then even in the middle of chaos, you'll find stability. Because no matter what storms come your way, you'll know this truth. You are already complete, just as you are. You're no longer waiting for someone to complete you, because in Him, you already are. There's no need to chase after people to give your life meaning, because deep down, you already understand your purpose. You've stopped letting your joy rise and fall with your circumstances, because your joy is rooted in something far deeper, something unshaken by the ups and downs of life. It's grounded in a place that remains steady, even when everything around you shifts. And that, my friend, is where real freedom begins. When you truly grasp that your happiness isn't dependent on another person or a particular job or even a certain outcome, you begin to live differently. You're no longer paralyzed by fear, no longer gripped by the anxiety of losing someone or something. You step into life with a sense of freedom that allows you to breathe fully, to dream boldly, and to live authentically. Let's face it, many of us have spent years secretly terrified of being alone. It's like the world has convinced us that solitude is something to avoid, as if being alone is some kind of failure or punishment. But what if that belief is all wrong? Being alone doesn't mean you're unloved or forgotten. It doesn't mean you're broken or abandoned. Being alone can be one of the most sacred, powerful spaces you can enter. It's a chance to tune in to your soul, your desires, your purpose, and most importantly, to God. In solitude, there's room to breathe. There's space to think clearly. You begin to rediscover yourself without the noise of others' opinions or expectations. You're no longer defined by external labels or roles. You can pause and ask yourself the real questions, the ones that truly matter. Who am I beyond what others see? What am I longing for at this stage in life? What has God uniquely placed within me to do? And how can I walk in that purpose, not tomorrow, but today? Solitude gives you the freedom to wrestle with those questions and sit with them without judgment. It allows you to slowly come to a place of deep understanding, where you're no longer afraid of your own thoughts or your own presence. And that's where a beautiful transformation begins. Because when you know who you are, and you actually enjoy being with yourself, you begin to taste a peace that is unlike anything the world can offer. It's not dependent on praise or applause. It doesn't come from fitting into someone else's expectations. It comes from a quiet confidence in knowing that you, just as you are already enough. There's no need to beg for validation from others when you've already been affirmed by the one who created you. In those quiet moments of being alone, healing begins. You start to unpack the wounds you've carried silently for years. You can reflect honestly on your past, on the pain, the regrets, the disappointments, without judgment or shame. You begin to forgive yourself. You let go of the burdens you were never meant to carry. Your heart gets the space it needs to mend, to grow, to come back stronger. Because the truth is, God never designed you to be dependent on another person for your joy. He wants you to find that joy in Him, in His love, His purpose, and in the incredible person He created you to be. The world may keep telling you that you're not complete unless you have someone by your side. But don't believe that lie. You're already whole. You're already deeply loved. You're already made whole in Him. And when you finally begin to see that, really see it, it changes everything. The moment you realize that your happiness doesn't depend on the opinions, presence, or approval of others, something inside you shifts. That realization brings a kind of freedom that no one can take from you. Now, this doesn't mean you'll never desire companionship. Of course you will. We're human. We're wired for connection. And longing for meaningful, deep relationships is completely natural. But here's the difference. Once you know you're already complete, you stop seeking people just to fill a void. You no longer feel the urge to settle for someone just to feel less alone. Instead, you become intentional. You stop chasing after validation and start waiting for the kind of connection that reflects your worth. You no longer tie your sense of joy or peace to someone else's choices, mood, or attention. And when that shift happens, something beautiful begins. You start attracting the kind of relationships that are rooted in respect, in truth, in love that gives instead of takes. You draw people who see you, not for what you can give them, but for who you truly are. These are life-giving relationships, grounded in mutual growth, shared values, and emotional safety. They're not based on fear of being alone, but on a foundation of wholeness and peace. So stop waiting. Stop holding back your own joy as if someone else has the power to unlock it for you. You don't need anyone to approve of your happiness. You don't need anyone else to tell you that you're enough. You already are. Right now, just as you are, God has already chosen you. He's already called you his own. He's already equipped you with everything you need to walk through life in peace, purpose, and joy. So why keep looking outside when what you need is already within? When you learn how to be happy on your own, without leaning on others to keep you going, you discover a strength you didn't know you had. You become more grounded, more resilient. And in that space, you begin to understand that the only constant you truly need to rely on is God. Because when you rest in his love, when you trust his timing, his plans, his path for your life, no person, no crisis, no unexpected storm can take away your joy. You found the source. And unlike anything else in this world, that source is eternal. It never runs dry. It never fades. It's always enough. You see, learning to be content and joyful on your own doesn't just free you from the fear of being alone. It opens the door to something even greater. It unlocks the path to discovering your true strength, the depth of your resilience, and the power of the gifts God has already placed within you. There's something incredibly empowering about standing tall on your own, looking life in the face, and realizing that you are capable, not because of who stands beside you, but because of who lives within you. It's in those quiet moments of independence, in those times when you choose to rise on your own, that something inside you awakens. You begin to recognize your own voice, your own value, your own purpose. And isn't that what so many of us have been searching for all along? For far too long, we've been taught to measure our worth by how much we do for others. We define ourselves by how much we can give, how much we can achieve, how much we can sacrifice. The world often tells us that we are only valuable when we are useful to someone else, when we're pouring ourselves out for the benefit of others, even if it leaves us empty. But there comes a moment when you begin to see things differently, when you learn to walk independently, not in isolation, but in strength. You discover that your worth isn't tied to your output. It isn't about your performance, your productivity, or your position in someone else's life. Your worth comes from your identity, the one God gave you long before the world had anything to say about it. Being alone invites you to turn inward, not in a selfish way, but in a deeply necessary, healing way. It's an opportunity to pause and ask yourself, who am I, really? What do I want? Not for someone else, but for me. What kind of life has God called me to live? Because until you take the time to ask those questions, to truly get to know your own heart, it's hard to give yourself authentically to others. Far too many people move through life without ever pausing to understand themselves. They give and give, hoping that their worth will be confirmed through service, through sacrifice, through someone else's appreciation. But what if you could find your value by simply embracing who you already are? So many people go through life in a constant chase. The next relationship, the next job, the next big thing, rarely stopping to ask themselves the most important question. Who am I, really? And that's the gift of solitude. When you're alone, truly alone with your thoughts and your heart, you finally get the time and space to explore that very question without interruption or pressure. It's in those quiet moments that you reconnect with the dreams you may have once put aside. The desires that still burn within you, the passions that got buried beneath responsibilities, expectations, or the needs of others, they start to resurface. You get to rediscover what lights you up from the inside. What makes you feel excited to wake up in the morning? What brings you true joy? Not temporary distractions, but real joy. What do you feel called to give to the world? And here's where everything begins to shift. When you know who you are, when you understand your strengths, your passions, your God-given purpose, you start to look at the world through a completely different lens. You stop needing other people's opinions to define your worth. You stop seeking approval in places that were never meant to affirm you. You begin to let go of the weight of other people's expectations. You no longer stress over whether others will accept or reject you, because that acceptance no longer defines your value. The opinions of friends, family, or even strangers don't have the power they once did. Why? Because you've already found your validation, not in people, but in God. You begin to see that the things you once chased, status, recognition, fitting in, are no longer what drives you. Now, you're living for something greater, something higher, a purpose that comes not from the world, but from within, from knowing exactly who you are and what God has placed you here to do. And that, right there, is where the real power of being content in your own company begins to unfold. You come to understand that your worth, your mission, and your calling have already been determined, not by anyone around you, but by your Creator. You are uniquely designed, fully equipped, and deeply capable of fulfilling what He's called you to do. No one else can walk your path. No one else can live your assignment. And when you start to believe that, not just in your mind, but in your heart, you step into a new level of confidence. You no longer crave external approval because you've already been approved by the one who matters most. You stop waiting for someone to give you permission to chase your dreams, to speak your truth, or to answer your calling. You stop second-guessing yourself because now you know who you are and you know what you're capable of. And as you walk in that clarity and confidence, your vision sharpens. You begin to see new doors opening, new paths emerging. You start taking bold steps, ones you may have avoided in the past. You begin making choices that align with your purpose, even if they challenge the expectations others may have for you. You begin to live with clarity and intention. Each step you take is purposeful, aligned with the path that God has laid out just for you. You no longer move through life aimlessly or with hesitation. Instead, there's a quiet confidence guiding your every decision because you know who you are and, more importantly, whose you are. But this journey doesn't stop at personal growth. As you step more fully into your identity, something powerful happens. You begin to attract the right people into your life. People who genuinely respect you. People who don't just tolerate your presence, but who celebrate your authenticity. They recognize your inner strength, your quiet confidence, and the peace that radiates from someone who has made peace with themselves. You find yourself surrounded by individuals who challenge you to grow, not by pressuring or changing you, but by encouraging the very best within you. They stand with you, not because they want to fix or complete you, but because they see the value in walking beside you. These relationships are no longer about filling a void. They're about sharing your life from a place of fullness, with someone who enhances, rather than defines, the person God has already created you to be. That's the beauty of learning to be happy alone. It's not about cutting people out or retreating from the world. It's about realizing that your wholeness comes from within, that you are enough just as you are, and that your value doesn't depend on someone else's presence or approval. It's about stepping into your God-given identity with boldness, walking with assurance, and embracing the truth that your most important relationship is the one you build with yourself and with your Creator. So give yourself that space. Take the time to get to know who you really are, beneath the noise, beneath the roles you've played. Embrace the quiet. Lean into the solitude, because it's in that space that you'll begin to uncover your worth, your purpose, and your calling. And when you do, you'll come to see that the life you were always meant to live was never about chasing approval or waiting to be chosen. It's about living fully, living freely, living from a place of deep knowing that you are exactly who you were always meant to be. And in that knowing, you'll find real, lasting happiness. Wishing you peace, health, and joy on your journey. And don't forget to subscribe to Mindset Daily for more inspiration and encouragement every step of the way.